My name is Shajiv Jagannathan, and today we have a special guest host on our episode today. We have Utsav Chakrabarti, Executive Director of Hindu Action. Utsav is an architect by profession and has spent over 18 years presenting the case for Hindu and indigenous communities to thought leaders in Washington, D.C. His work has reached lawmakers at Capitol Hill and the Human Rights Commission, and he's an astute observer of Washington Beltway trends. His deep understanding of intersectional socio-political movements is rooted in his study of architecture, the built environment, and the impact on societies and civilizations. So it's an honor to have you on the show.
The honor is all mine, Shajiv.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. Coming right out of a presidential election here. So before we jump into that, for our viewers on the show, so if you wouldn't mind, can you share a brief overview of your journey and how your work has evolved over the years?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a DC person for the last 25 years. Lived mostly in DC, worked mostly in DC as an architect. In 2022, after working for 22 years, I decided to quit and do advocacy as full-time work. And since in the last 2 years, I have been doing advocacy work, primarily as the executive director of Hindu Action, but I also interact with other organizations, and I have been geopolitical analyst on many issues. My background over the last 2 decades. In terms of my journey through advocacy, it has been very interesting. The more I delve into this effort, the more I see the need for it, especially on behalf of the American Hindu community, a 5 million strong community, very wealthy, but punching way below its weight when it comes to the public square messaging as well as political clout.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm very much in line with your thought process there. I think we have been punching below the weight line for a very long time. So really appreciate certainly your efforts on behalf of the Hindu community as well. Let's talk a little bit about what sort of transitioned you from architecture to advocating for Hindu and indigenous community. What was that transition?
So, while I was an architect in DC, I was fortunate to have worked in offices that were right in the middle of the city, literally a block away from the White House. So I got a good view of how Washington DC politics and geopolitics plays out. And over the years, the more I saw it, the more I felt the need to speak up. So not only was I working 9 to 5 as an architect, but after 5 o'clock, I would become the voluntary advocate and show up in events, show up in places, show up in think tanks, meet ambassadors, meet political leaders, and it turned out to be a second hobby job for me. And then I decided that eventually I need to transition into doing it full time and see what happens. Amazing
journey. So awesome. I'm sure at this point my viewers are well aware of who you are. So let's jump right into the questions of the day regarding the election. So definitely want to get your perspective on a whole bunch of topics here. So as we're already aware here, President Trump was just reelected the 47th president of the United States. I want to get your initial reaction to this outcome and how you see the new Trump administration impacting U.S.-India relations moving forward.
So this was a long time coming. I think over the last 2 years at least, the trends in American public discourse has been moving towards a change, and people have been expressing in different ways that they wanted change, not just because of the economic issues that were increasingly becoming intolerable for many people, especially people who are not that well off. But also geopolitical issues, the multiple conflicts around the world, and the open support for elements that are not very friendly to either America or to other countries around the world from the administration. The Ukraine conflict, the conflict in the Middle East, all these things trickled down into the minds and hearts of the people, and people started feeling stifled by the way our country was proceeding toward the direction in which it was proceeding. And to add more salt to the injury here, what happened was that the change of the Biden, from Biden to Kamala Harris as a candidate, and the way it was done, it really did not go down well with a big section of the electorate. And I think many Democrats themselves didn't either come out to vote. As you can see that there are 15 million less voters this year from the Democratic Party compared to 2020. So they either didn't come out to vote or they switched sides. So all in all, I think these things added up. And to add more further, complications to this whole effort, the Democrats really lost the narrative in the media. The media lost trust. Mainstream legacy media really lost trust. And Elon Musk buying Twitter, or X as we call it now, that really leveled the playing field. X became the primary source of information and news for a big chunk of the country. And it kind of balanced out on the narratives that the mainstream legacy media was pulling out. And they became more and more incredulous in their messaging. And it all added up. And Benjamin Netanyahu, I believe, gave the coup de grace to the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think that's a very fascinating take. I would certainly like to dive a little bit more into some of those topics as well. And I agree that I think there's what I've noticed is very much similar to what you're saying in terms of the fact that there's a trickle-down effect of several different factors that certainly led to, I would say, in my opinion, this election was more of a referendum more than anything else, right? It was definitely a referendum of the American public. Now, if you want to dive a little bit into what you talked about with regards to some of the conflicts around the world and how that trickled down into people's thought processes, and even thinking about that from an Asian Indian perspective for Indian American citizens, how do you think some of those conflicts played in their minds and hearts? Or do you think that's more of an economic perspective, which is if we're going to go fight another war like we did back in 08 and 05 and all those different wars we fought on a credit card, do you think that those economic factors definitely played a role, or do you think people are more concerned about safety and security on a global standpoint, or a combination of those?
I think it was a combination of multiple factors. Just to touch upon specifically the Indian subcontinent and what was unfolding there, I think a big section of the Indian American community, the Indian American voting community, the American Hindu voting community, felt slighted by the way India was treated in the geopolitical sphere. They were not happy at the way anti-India elements within America, both from the extreme left, from the Islamist groups, as well as from the Khalistani groups, were not only given a free pass, but they were given open patronage. And literally with a day before Prime Minister Modi was visiting America this time in June, the White House invited a bunch of Khalistanis and had a briefing with them. So these things didn't go down well with the community in America, and it didn't go down well obviously at the foreign policy level with India. To add further salt to the injury here, the way the coup was done in Bangladesh, a regime change operation was inflicted on Bangladesh quite openly with the support of our administration here. It was visible to most people who were observants of White House and State Department policymaking. And the way it unfolded, and the way the Hindu community in Bangladesh was targeted, and the way the White House stayed silent and in fact abetted some of the violence, all these things created a very bad taste in the mouths of the common American Hindu or the Indian American community. And the fact that Democrats who were from the Indian American community, representing the community in the White House and in the State Department, didn't do much. So that increased the frustration further in the community. And I do believe that once the data comes out, and I think some data is already coming out, there was a significant shift from the Indian American or the American Hindu community in its voting patterns, which is traditionally Democrat, but it moves towards Republican. And in places like Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia still went to the Democrats, but in Pennsylvania, I think a big difference was made to the final outcomes.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely seeing some of those patterns come through. I think Berkeley just came out with a survey of Asian Indian voting trends, and they're very much in line with your thought process. One thing that I'd kind of like to dig through a little bit more along what you just said, right, in terms of Democrat policies, specifically regarding the genocide in Bangladesh, certainly the Hindu and Indian community in so many different ways. Some of the lawmakers from the Democrat side who actually came out and condemned it have seen certainly better results in the elections than those who didn't. So I'd like to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I must quite clearly qualify that while I'm being critical of certain decisions of the current administration, I by no means mean to suggest that every Democrat or every person in either side is accountable for everything that this party does. It doesn't apply to the Democrats. It will not apply to the Republicans either. And I should name Congressman Sri Thanedar, Raja Krishnamurthy. they are Democrats and they stood up when it counted. I mean, Congressman Thanedar has been a vocal proponent of the rights of the American Hindu community. And when temple after temples were being vandalized across the country in the last 2-3 years, he spoke up. We worked with him to introduce the House Resolution 1131 against anti-Hindu hate. So all those things did come from the Democrat side. But that does not absolve the poor decision making, the poor perception generation from the White House at the topmost level. I think the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris did not speak up when Hindu temples were being targeted, it betrayed the trust of the community, who were on the other hand being told by her Indian American supporters that she's very much one of us. So it's the dissonance in the messaging. I think it built distrust, and the outcomes are visible.
Yeah, and I think just a few days before the election, President Trump had a lengthy tweet condemning the violence in Bangladesh against Hindus. Do you think that would have helped push him above the finish line?
Absolutely. I think, I must first congratulate the entire team that worked on it. Our team worked on it. I know individuals in different parts of the country who worked very hard in the last 2-3 months to convey the realities that the community is facing, both in America and in the Indian subcontinent, especially in Bangladesh, the Hindu community is facing, to the Trump campaign. And I must thank, President Trump. I must thank Tulsi Gabbard, a very, very proud American Hindu, and Vivek Ramaswamy for carrying the message forward within the Trump circles. And I think it did help create a buzz in the community that if nothing else, no matter what the outcomes are, at least President Trump is fully aware of what's going on. And you could contrast that with the messaging that was coming out of the White House or the Harris campaign, which barely even would use the word Hindu. They would call Diwali a South Asian festival. So, this difference in the messaging and this difference in understanding the pulse of the community obviously made a huge difference. And I won't be surprised if Georgia is one of the states where the tables were turned, possibly in Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah, certainly considering the demographics of Asian Indian populations there, I would concur with that. I think so. So, just sort of segueing to that thought process of what you just talked about, right? With President Trump's win, there's been a lot of prominent Indian Americans, including Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard. On the tech side, you've got Satya Nadella, you've got Sundar Pichai, all sort of congratulating the president on his win and talking more about collaborating and working together. So where do you see the Indian American community's role in its influence in the United States going forward, knowing fully well, hey, we've got the vice president's wife who is Asian Indian origin. So where do you see the broader Indian American community's role going forward in the new Trump administration? How do you forecast that?
I think there will be a significant influence. And I think going forward, one point I do try to reiterate is that it's going to move, the identity of the community is going to move away from being extra geographical, as in being called Indian or South Asian, to integral to America, just like the Jewish community or the Muslim community does, which is American Hindu community, or just like they say Jewish community. They don't say they're Israeli Americans. So I think that transition in the self-identification will also happen as we go forward. I mean, this time more than ever before, J.D. Vance's wife was presented not as Indian American as much as American Hindu. So I think that transition is happening right now, and the influence of that group of people on the administration will be significant. I mean, Vivek's role in Trump's victory, or Tulsi's role in Trump's victory, and not to mention obviously J.D. Vance and his better half's role. These were very effective roles. In fact, what the perception that the Americans got was that even though the Democrats came to the party of diversity and the big tent party, it was the Republicans who were actually the party of diversity and big tent in terms of the implications and the application of their ideas. So this will have a tremendous influence. And we should also not forget Kash Patel. He was behind the scenes, but at the policy level, at the decision-making level of the Trump campaign, he had a very key role. He's one of the very few people who stood by Donald Trump during his worst days of witch hunt, if I may call so, from the Democrat side. And I think he will also play a very key role in the upcoming administration. So going forward, I'm very, very positive about the influence of the community. And I think it's good for America in total.
Yeah, and so just want to sort of segue around that thought process because I'm sure there's a lot of speculation around, where does Mr. Ramaswamy fit, right? Where is Ms. Gabbard going to fit? And where is certainly Mr. Patel, Kash Patel, going to fit in all of this? There's a lot of speculation, but I'd like to get at least your perspective on where do you think in the new Trump administration, certainly these three very key individuals, and I may be missing a few more, but these three have been very prominent and out there being those folks of, as we like to call it, Hindu American heritage, right? Being out there, being very vocally supportive of the president, and certainly being instrumental in his win. Where do you see, at least from your perspective, where do you think they're going to fit in the new administration?
I think Kash Patel is somebody who fits very well into the Justice Department. There is a lot of speculation that they are discussing about making him the chief of the CIA, which I think is a very bad idea. I don't want the CIA chief to be, somebody of Indian or Hindu origin, because that person will face further pressure and will constantly be accused of being disloyal, even though I'm 100% sure he won't be. So I would rather see Kash Patel to be in the Justice Department, taking care of American interest within the country. Now, in terms of Tulsi, I think Tulsi is somebody who can fit well in the foreign policy spectrum. She has always been a vocal voice for American foreign policy issues. She has faced tremendous discrimination for standing out, challenging our positions where it has been morally questionable. I mean, Tulsi was targeted when she spoke up against our aggression in Syria and our alignment with Al Qaeda in Syria, which was appalling back during the Obama administration's time. So she stood out, and I think she will fit into the foreign policy role, maybe Secretary of State or somebody very senior in the State Department. Vivek Ramaswamy, I believe, is somebody who can lead the education department, something to do with the future of the country, because Vivek's vision in terms of where America should be 50 years from now, 100 years from now, is very unique and very positive. So I think in the field of education, in the field of business, transparency in business, I think Vivek can do a great job.
And where do you think Governor Haley is going to fit in all this? I know she was running against him, certainly then went out and endorsed him. So where do you think she's going to fit in all this?
So I think Governor Haley is somebody who is a Washington. She's a Washington personality. I think the only place where she will fit really well is the United Nations. I think she can go back being the voice of the United States at the United Nations. She speaks the language of diplomacy very well. She speaks the language of European outreach very well. So our outreach to NATO, our outreach to the rest of the world at the UN, or in similar multilateral bodies, can be well represented by somebody like Nikki Haley.
Mm-hmm. So let's sort of switch gears a little bit and talk more about where you see the future administration is going to look like, right? So let's take 2016 through 2020, the first Trump administration. During his first term, there was certainly a big shift in trade and defense policies, everything from removal of certain GSP benefits, the tariffs that were implemented that did affect Section 232, under 232, that did affect Indian trade in terms of iron and steel. There was a certain shift in the Trump administration. It wasn't just again sort of affecting India, but generally a global shift in terms of trade and defense policies. Now with the sort of Trump 2.0 and Modi 3.0, right? What specific areas do you think the U.S.-India collaboration will be prioritized or face new challenges if you're going to use that first term as your sort of benchmark?
So I think the first term, there will be a significant difference between the leadership that Trump had during the first term and the current. First term was a testing ground for Trump. He was somebody who wasn't accepting of the status quo, and he wanted to change things. But he was surrounded by people within his own party who were very comfortable in the status quo, and to use a not so a pleasing term, he was accused. People said that he was surrounded by the swamp, as they call it in DC. So I think in the last 4 years, Trump has figured out, I would say weeded out, those who believed that what he was trying to do in terms of changing the status quo versus those who were quote unquote part of the swamp. they have been kind of separated out from his first term team. So now he will find loyalists in his team who will be far more willing to go by his more dismantle the system approach than the 2016 term. And in doing so, I think he will be much more aggressive and much more effective in doing whatever he's doing. That has two implications. When it comes to India, it will mean some positive things and some negative things. The positive things will be that he will be far more effective in containing the interfering approach of the current administration as well as those who are part of the swamp. The constant need to meddle in India's diverse affairs and trying to control India's internal politics will be reduced significantly, because Trump, by principle, is a non-interfering, isolationist president. He doesn't like interfering in other people's affairs. On the flip side, in terms of trade, I think India will be dealing with far more threats of tariffs. Trump is somebody who uses tariff as a tool to promote American business, and in return affect international trade significantly. So India will have to figure out ways to do damage control when it comes to tariff laws. And it could go down to simple things. I mean, interestingly, back in 2016 to 2020 period, Harley Davidson was something like Trump insisted on removing tariffs from. And India was like, fair enough, fine. Our country barely uses 100 Harley Davidsons a year. Sure, we'll remove the tariffs. Let more people buy. Instead of 100, there will be 200 Harley Davidsons in India. So those are small little things that India will have to juggle around to make the Trump administration happy. But I think overall, there will be more consonance because there is better feelings between the two leaders. See, when the two leaders approach each other with a position of confidence and good faith, the transactions, however diverse they are and however the difficulties may be in the two powers in terms of dealing with each other, they can be smoothed out. The problem with the current administration was there was a complete lack of trust. There were senior leaders in the Biden-Harris team that hated Prime Minister Modi and his politics. And because of that, there was a huge amount of distrust. And that distrust could be seen on the ground at every level, including the behavior of the American ambassador to India.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of President Trump and Prime Minister Modi's friendship has been well documented. They've been very close friends. They talk about each other a lot. I think during several podcasts, President Trump even recalled that Prime Minister Modi was one of his heroes, even referring to him in that manner. So I think there's a good friendship there that they've had, and I certainly foresee that hopefully continuing into the next administration. Now, talking about tariffs, right? Because again, when you talk about that friendship, and Prime Minister Modi's friendship certainly with other BRIC regions as well, if the U.S. were to go down the path of imposing more tariffs, and it's inevitable at this point, considering, as you said, the first term was a testing ground. The second term is more of an implementation of that testing ground. The last time around, India did retaliatory tariffs on certain U.S. products. Do you foresee that as a potential tool that the Modi government will use?
It depends. It depends on the severity of the tariffs. It depends on how it impacts India's business. See, one thing our audiences and no matter which party you support, even the ones who support Republicans and are Trump fans, one thing everybody needs to understand, that the relationship between India and America is susceptible to Thucydides' trap. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, Thucydides' trap is a term that is used to define the relationship between existing powers and upcoming powers. China and America had that relationship for a long period of time over the last 20-25 years. China has now transcended the Thucydides trap. The next country that is in line to be in the Thucydides trap is India. So no matter how much the two countries are friendly and are looking out for each other's interest in terms of the leadership's approach, there will be road bumps because of the Thucydides trap. It is inevitable. But if there is good faith between the leaderships of the two countries, which I believe currently exists more between Trump and Modi than did between Biden and Modi or Kamala and Modi, then the ways to smooth out the outcomes of the Thucydides trap will be much more easier and pleasant. So there will be bumps in the road. Also regarding BRICS, I think India is now more and more committed to a multilateral world, and I think Trump is one of the few leaders who is beginning to recognize that there is going to be a multilateral world. Our goal should be to deal with it and get the best out of it than to fight it. because fighting it obviously has been shown in the last 2-3 years of conflict in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Fighting it hasn't helped America. It has actually destroyed America's credibility globally. So I think Trump understands that, and I think it will be reflected in his policies.
Mm-hmm. So again, around policies and sort of that shift, right? Let's talk a little bit, switch gears a little bit to immigration, right? So obviously, one of the key elements between India as a nation and America as a nation has been that immigration, right? We rely heavily on H-1B visas and certainly other visas. There's huge backlogs in terms of Indian nationals who are in the United States who are on H-1B but now trying to get a green card. There's several. It's a multifaceted thing in terms of immigration, right? Where do you see? And I would say in the last 4 years under the Biden administration, there's been some sort of a shift in terms of H-1Bs, in terms of granting of H-1Bs, extensions. There've been some changes to the DHS policies. Now, if you take the first term, Trump 1.0, and then use that as a basis point, and to your point earlier, Trump 1.0 was a testing ground. It's going to be a little bit more different this time around. How do you think things are going to be from an immigration standpoint for those who want clarity, who want answers? And what do you think? What's your perspective in terms of the next administration from an immigration standpoint?
So I do believe that there will be stricter scrutinization of H-1B applicants. That was very much visible during the first Trump administration. And I do believe that that is important because, at the cost of alienating some of our own people, there has been a lot of incidences of H-1B misuse. Beginning in India. I mean, not most people who come here on student visa and get H1 usually are not the ones doing the misuse, but there are many companies in India who have done a lot of misuse of, or used the loopholes in the system to misuse the provisions from H1 visa. I think there needs to be better scrutiny of that because more deserving people should be coming here. That is important, and that will happen. Now, in terms of the green card backlog and the issues concerning Indian Americans who are in America, and who are waiting for decades. I mean, I myself waited for 16 years to get my green card because I came here on a student visa and then a H1 visa. I think that will smoothen out a little bit because there has been so much effort made over the last decade to address that issue. And with the Senate and House that is kind of in one party's hand, now both of them will be in one party's hand, there will be tremendous pressure on the Trump administration to make the process smoother and increase the speed of the receipt of green card for Indian Americans. And most likely they may deliver on that because these are illegal immigrants. What I think the implications of the new Trump immigration policy will be on the illegal immigrants or undocumented migrants as the current administration calls them. That I think will be his primary focus. He has promised in multiple speeches, and I think he might deliver. The least he would do is to try to deport a couple of 100,000 undocumented migrants who have been accused of severe criminal, records. There are hundreds of thousands of them who came here with criminal records. So I think that's the first thing he will do. And to do that, the amount of resources and efforts it would take, I think will take away most of their enthusiasm in terms of dealing on the immigration issue. And so I am hoping that legal immigrants will have a better time. But
I think Trump had in a previous speech even mentioned the fact that if you're in the United States and you go to a university from here, you should have a direct path to a green card. Now
I don't know how that I don't know that if that is going to happen, but yeah. I certainly believe that people like Elon Musk are saner minds who would give him good counsel in terms of understanding that legal immigrants from countries like India play a key role in improving America's economy and its ability to provide jobs. I mean, Elon's own team is full of Indian Americans, and so are people in high value positions across the country. So I do believe Trump understands that. I believe the Biden-Harris team understood that, but they were so much beholden to the lobbies in this space of immigration that it was tragic that they did not do things that they could have easily done. I mean, they needed some executive orders to just speed up the green card process, and they refused to do that.
Agreed. So let's sort of switch gears a little bit now and start talking a little bit about the defense, sort of certainly within the Indo-Pacific region. Right now, during Trump's first term, that U.S.-India defense partnerships were very strong. There was a significant focus on countering China's influence, certainly in the India-Pacific region. In the last 4 years, that has changed a little bit, I would say. So I'd like to get your perspective, certainly on how that's going to change. Certainly with COMCASA in 2018. Are we going to see something like that come through this time around in the India-Pacific region with the new administration? How do you think our defense strategies are going to grow? And on top of that, during Trump's first administration, there was a massive sale of certainly U.S. defense equipment to India. Right, there was a lot of trade in that side of the fence as well. So I'd like to get your perspective, sort of switch gears now on the defense side on the India-Pacific region and how you foresee that in the upcoming administration.
So I think there will be a positive development in this direction. I think the Quad will become more relevant. It is unfortunate that over the last 4 years, the Quad was made less relevant under the Biden-Harris team. They went towards a separate, the English-speaking countries there kind of created their own little team with Australia and Japan. So I think the Quad will find more relevance, and in the process, there will be more defense-to-defense alliances, defense-to-defense operations, exercises. All those things will increase. I think there has been a huge setback in terms of the supply of high-quality engines for India's Tejas fighter jet program. The Americans have been holding back the supply of the engines, so I think that might restart. And more importantly, going forward, I think from India's perspective, India would more and more insist, it will be more and more insisting on transfer of technologies and cost cutting at the American end. So if America transfers technologies to India for its defense products, and then India manufactures them in India, then American defense products would become cheaper for American consumption, as well as India will gain the experience and the machining tooling abilities produce high quality defense products. So it will be a mutually beneficial relationship, and both countries, I think, will work towards that. I think once the two countries learn to trust each other more, they will move in that direction. Because in the current scenario, India has been moving away from American defense equipments, and India has been re-engaging Russia, for lack of a better phrase, given the outcomes of the conflict in Ukraine, where the Russian equipments actually have done far better than they were assumed to be doing, and the American equipments have not done as good as America wanted them to do. So India's own defense positioning and posturing has changed a little bit based on the outcomes of the conflicts. But I think long-term, India would look towards transfer of technology and better end user agreement with American products, defense products, so that the two countries can treat each other with more trust. India wouldn't want to have a helicopter that can be switched off from Washington, D.C. when a crucial time comes in attacking a terrorist base in Pakistan.
Yeah. So along those lines, if we're going to start looking at future outlook, right? So we talked about the defense strategies, we talked about immigration, we talked about economic strategies. But in your opinion, right, going into a new administration, this is an all new administration, and most likely Republicans are going to take the House. Again, still unsure, but if they do, it's possible. Senate, House, executive presidency, and even a conservative Supreme Court, right? Where do you see are going to be the most promising avenues for collaboration between the U.S. and India as a nation? And where do you see areas as potential hurdles or challenges, right? Just sort of getting your perspective on the next 4 years of what we could potentially see.
I think countering terrorism, better human people-to-people relationship, better exchange of human resources, better exchange of technology are going to be the spaces where India and US can build stronger, more lasting partnerships, more trade, tariffs, a little bit on immigration possibly. Could be places where there could be more frictions between the two countries. I include the word immigration because I do believe that a lot of Indian Americans who came here illegally might be people who might get deported. So I don't know how India will react to that, but that is something that may happen. And so it depends on how the two countries will look at it. I do believe that counterterrorism will find a significant space in the two countries' relationship, given the fact that America is not right now home to many wanted terrorists from India. and they have been operating with almost direct support of the White House, the current White House. And that's something that India has been very unhappy about. The issue of Canada by extension, and how Canada deals with India and how the Five Eyes country deals with Canada will also be reflected in the new relationship.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up question that you got there. I was going to ask you about what you think about the situation, certainly between Canada and India in terms of relationships. It's obviously been declining over the last few months, and it continues to decline. So I was very curious to also get your perspective as we're closing things up here to see what you think, how that's going to change. Certainly, do you foresee President Trump's administration, at least from an external, from State Department standpoint, having a say in terms of what the Indo-Canada relationship is going to look like?
I think the current Biden-Harris administration had a key role in encouraging Canada to act the way they acted vis-a-vis India, and that was unprecedented. That has never happened in my understanding of the entire 60-70 years of independent India's foreign policy positioning. The new administration, by extension, I believe, will probably try to rectify some of those mistakes. I do believe that there will be, if not formal, but at least back channel pressure on the Trudeau Jagmeet Singh team, if they survive that far in their own electoral politics. There will be pressure on Trudeau to back down from antagonizing India all the time and taking such an aggressive positioning against India. And I think that will be reflected in the way things unfold. But we must be careful, because we have to understand that the Khalistan movement is embedded in both the conservative as well as the liberal side of the political spectrum. And I personally know, there are Khalistanis who when they're in California are like true blue liberals, and the moment they take their truck and drive across to Arizona are turned Republican and donate to both sides. So it is a pernicious agenda-driven movement with backing from serious elements within the state apparatus. And therefore, I think it will be a tough nut to crack, but we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Chakraborty. This is very fascinating, certainly, to get your perspective on important matters as we're going into a whole new era in terms of a new administration. So we really appreciate your time here today. Certainly invaluable to navigate this new chapter, to get your perspective on U.S.-India relations and the role of the Indian American community. So we look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Rajiv, and great work, great questions. Really appreciate this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.